The human species that shouldn't exist. At least 20 members of an unknown human species ended up inside a cave that very few people can safely enter. There was no easy way in or out. To reach their bones, explorers had to squeeze through gaps as narrow as 18 centimeters, crawl deep underground, and enter chambers trapped in total darkness. And somehow, the dead were already there. Infants, children, adults, the elderly. This did not look like one person who got lost. It looked like a mystery that had repeated itself. Then, scientists rebuilt the skeletons, and things became even stranger. Their feet were shaped for walking like us. Their wrists and palms were built for strong, careful grips, but their fingers curved like climbing hooks, and their brains were less than half the size of ours. The feet said human. The fingers said tree climber. The brain said this creature belonged millions of years in the past, but it did not. Homo naledi lived between roughly 335,000 and 236,000 years ago. That means this small-brained human relative survived during the same broad period when early members of our own species were already in Africa. Then, in 2026, scientists tested proteins hidden inside its teeth. They searched for a marker normally found in males. Across the tested individuals, they failed to detect it even once. A strange body, at least 20 dead individuals, no simple explanation, and no detected male marker. This was a prehistoric cold case. The story began in 2013 inside South Africa's Rising Star cave system. Two cavers entered a remote chamber and noticed bones on the ground. The remains might belong to an unknown human relative, but many scientists could not physically reach them. Parts of the route were so narrow that only very small, highly trained explorers could pass through. A special team of 6 women was selected. They became known as the underground astronauts. They crawled into the darkness and removed the fossils one piece at a time. A tooth, a finger, a jaw, a nearly complete hand. Then more bones and more. The first major excavation recovered more than 1,550 fossil pieces from at least 15 individuals. Later work raised the known number to at least 20. Scientists had not found one strange skeleton. They had found part of an entire population. The skull offered the first easy answer. The brain inside it ranged from roughly 465 to 610 cubic centimeters. That was closer in size to much older human relatives than to us. So Homo naledi must have been extremely ancient, maybe 2 or 3 million years old. Case closed. Then scientists examined the feet. They looked surprisingly human and were built for efficient walking. The easy answer died immediately. Next came the hands. The wrists and palms looked suited for strong, precise movement. Then the fingers ruined the picture. They were deeply curved, as if they still expected to grip branches. The shoulders also carried older features. It was like evolution had built the lower body for walking across open land, but left the upper body ready to escape into a tree. Every part seemed to belong to a different creature. Then, scientists dated the fossils. They used several methods on the teeth, rocks, and cave material around them. The answer was roughly 335,000 to 236,000 years ago. Homo naledi was not an early experiment that vanished millions of years before us. It survived much later. While early Homo sapiens lived in Africa, this smaller-brained relative may still have walked across the same continent. Human evolution was not a straight line. It was a crowded world. Homo naledi is only one of several human species most of us were never taught about. So if real mysteries from our evolutionary past interest you, subscribe to the Sapiens Archive. Because the deeper we search through the human family tree, the stranger our own story becomes. And in this case, the strangest question was still unanswered. Who put all those bodies inside the cave? The first suspect was an accident. Maybe a group entered the cave, became trapped, and died in the darkness. It sounds believable, but the remains included infants, children, adults, and elderly individuals, and they did not appear to come from one clear moment. For the accident theory to work, members of the same species may have entered this dangerous place again and again across time. Possible? Yes. A clean answer? Not really. The second suspect was a predator. Maybe an animal dragged the bodies underground to eat them. But researchers did not find a convincing pattern showing that predators had collected the remains. The cave also lacked the normal mix of prey animals expected from a predator's den. Then came water. Could a flood have washed the bodies inside? Again, the cave did not offer a simple flood story. Every easy answer seemed to fail. That left one disturbing possibility. What if the bodies did not enter by accident? What if someone carried them? The most obvious answer would be other Homo naledi. Perhaps they moved their own dead into the cave. That would not automatically prove religion, funerals, or belief in an afterlife, but it would suggest that they treated their dead differently from everything else. For a species with such a small brain, that would be remarkable. Then, a darker theory enters the story. In some domesticated animals, many generations under another species' control have been linked with smaller brains. So could Homo naledi have been controlled by another human species? Kept captive, forced to live under someone else's rules? In its darkest form, the idea begins to sound like prehistoric slavery. It is shocking. It is also unsupported. There is no known evidence from Rising Star showing that another species controlled, bred, or imprisoned. The evidence available today cannot test a domestication theory. Their small brains may simply have been part of their own natural evolution. So prehistoric slavery makes an unforgettable suspect. But the evidence gives us no reason to arrest it. That brings us back to Homo naledi themselves. Maybe they were the ones carrying the bodies. The discovery team argued that Homo naledi may have deliberately moved its dead. Later, researchers reported features they believed could be graves. The headlines exploded. A creature with a much smaller brain may have buried its dead. If true, this could change how we think about intelligence. But other scientists pushed back. Bones can move underground, soil can shift, natural shapes can look like holes made on purpose. And no one knows every cave entrance that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. The researchers later added more evidence and strengthened their case, but serious disagreement remained. So did Homo naledi bury its dead? Maybe. The possibility is real, but it is still not accepted as a proven fact by everyone, and that matters. A good mystery does not become better when we pretend it has been solved. Then the teeth delivered the strangest clue of all. In 2026, researchers extracted ancient proteins from Homo naledi tooth enamel. They tested 23 teeth, representing at least 20 individuals. They searched for a protein called AMYL, which is normally linked to the Y chromosome and usually found in males. They did not detect it, not in one tested individual. The most direct explanation was hard to believe. The tested group may have been entirely female. Suddenly, a new theory appeared. Was this a female-only burial place? Was the cave a prehistoric cemetery reserved for women and girls? It is an incredible idea. But once again, the evidence stops us. The missing protein does not prove that every individual was female. Homo naledi males may have carried a genetic difference that stopped the marker from appearing. And even if every tested individual was female, proteins cannot tell us why they were inside the cave. They cannot reveal ritual. They cannot reveal social rules. They cannot reveal grief. The result gives us a pattern, not the story behind it. And that is what makes Homo naledi so powerful. Every answer creates another question. An ancient-looking creature that lived much later than expected. A cave full of bodies with no simple explanation. A possible burial site that scientists still argue about. And a tested group with no detected male mark. Homo naledi does not break evolution. It breaks the simple version of evolution most of us carry in our heads. Human history was not one creature slowly becoming smarter until it finally produced us. It was filled with different human relatives, different bodies, different brains, different ways of surviving. Homo naledi walked on human-like feet with a brain less than half the size of ours. Its hands could make precise grips, while its fingers remained curved for climbing. And somehow, its dead entered the darkness of Rising Star Cave. Perhaps they were carried there with care. Perhaps future evidence will reveal a simpler answer. But if deliberate burial is ever proven, it would show that behavior we call human may not require a brain shaped or sized like ours. Hundreds of thousands of years later, we recovered their bones, measured their skulls, and tested proteins inside their teeth. But we still do not know what happened in that darkness. We do not know exactly how the bodies arrived there. We do not know why no male-specific marker appeared in the tested sample. And we do not know what Homo naledi understood when one of its own stopped breathing. If this mystery changed the way you see human evolution, leave a like and subscribe to the Sapiens Archive, because Homo naledi is not the only lost human species that left behind questions we still cannot answer. Maybe intelligence does not need to look like ours. Maybe complex behavior does not require a brain as large as ours. And maybe humanity was never one clear path leading directly to us. Homo naledi should not exist. Not because evolution cannot explain it, but because it refuses to fit the comforting story we once told ourselves about becoming human.